His opponent, now coming down the aisle, weighing 237 pounds, Washington's own Rocky Johnson.
Con ustedes, la Parka.266番のKendo Nagasaki.
Hello everyone, it's IAmGoodOlJM here, coming to you from CSB Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling, on this January 17th, 2020. And it's not been a good year for pro wrestling, for their family, for their friends, their fans. As of last Saturday, there have been 3 tragic losses in the world of professional wrestling. And one of them, I don't want to say hits home because that'll be unfair and unselfish. Well, not, it will be selfish on my part to say, because one of the men who passed away this week, I was very fortunate and privileged, and I still am, to know some of his relatives that live near me. I'll have more on that on the next episode of Talking with JM that I'll speak about more in detail much later in this episode. But as a fan, well, let me rephrase that. As a human being, I was very sad and hurt to hear these names passing away. It's not my place to say why and questions the ones who you believe and worship in. It's not my place to, again, to be selfish and say it's not fair, but not that this was the case. In some scenarios, people make decisions that lead to losing their lives in the most ridiculous circumstances. And in other cases, mostly, it's because of health issues. Medicine can only do so much. Surgery and treatment can assist in prolonging one's life. But sometimes, in the end, the body just can't take anymore or just decides to give out. And at that point, there's really no one to blame. Now, in some of these passings this week, not all of them have been revealed as far as the cause of death, as family and other relatives have asked for privacy. And I think we should all give them that. But in no particular order, Kendo Nagasaki passed away last Saturday at the age of 71. Nagasaki, as it's been reported, had a pacemaker, which honestly I was not aware of, but it stopped. It stopped and it led to a cardiac issue and did not survive. Known for his run in the 80s and 90s, carrying a samurai sword and a samurai mask. And when he would remove it, he would have face paint on, war paint, if you will. And was also famous for the Asian mist, if that's what they call it, kind of like what Asuka does now, spitting the mist from her mouth into her opponent's eyes, causing blindness and burning sensations. Ask Becky Lynch. Had a major run in the United States as the Dragon Master and ended up in WCW in the early to mid 90s, and was a part of Gary Hart's J-Tex Corporation, along with the great Muda and Buzz Sawyer, so he was in great hands, and had memorable rivalries with Ric Flair, Sting, Ole and Arn Anderson, just to name a few. So this man's been around, of course, notwithstanding his career in Japan, which a lot of his great matches took place in. He was part back in '91, part in the cross promotion with the then WWF and SWS. There's footage of that online. I believe there was more than one show. Of course, you'll never find this on the WWE Network now. I'm not even sure if SWS ever sold their video library to anyone. But for now, the only way that I am aware of to view such shows is on YouTube, for one example. And maybe one day, if New Japan, because they have their own streaming network, can pick up the rights and air the footage. There were a lot of great matches on there. I believe there was a one-night tag team tournament. It's been a while. '91. It's been a while. The old memory bank lights are on kind of thing. No one's home right now. I myself had a busy week, but it's not about me right now. But at 71, Kendo Nagasaki has passed away. Over in Mexico, La Parka. Now, there was some confusion, and it's understandably why. This is not La Parka from WCW. But then again, he came through AAA first before he got up to WCW back in the 90s during the Monday Night Wars. Alfonso Margarito Tapia Ibarra. Once again, I hope I didn't mispronounce his name. But at the age of 56, passed away. Now, the previous incarnation of La Parka from WCW now goes by L.A. Park or La Park. He has his runs out in the West Coast, so it's not the same person, to avoid any confusion. But La Parka, who passed away, had an unfortunate accident during a show back in November of 2019 in performing what's called a suicide dive from inside the ring through the ropes to the outside, basically trying to use his body as a battering ram to his opponent, who's on the floor, on the arena floor, near the barricades separating the ring and the fans. I'm not gonna sit here and calculate or investigate or because there is footage of this, and I saw it once, and once was enough, and even describing it to you might want to raise up your curiosity just to look for this. But I'm not your father, but what happened was he went for the suicide dive. He just missed his opponent. It didn't look like the opponent was trying to dodge or avoid him, so it might have been a bit of a miscue, and not to mention La Parka's feet got caught in the ropes. So obviously, well, maybe not so much obviously, but what could have happened because of his feet were caught in the ropes, undershot or maybe even overshot. Who knows? Again, I'm not an investigative reporter and really want to dwell on the details, except that the man has passed away. He hit headfirst in said barricade that was not padded as we normally see on WWE programming, other than just have a thin layer of tarp or just a cover, what we normally see at say at tailgating, or if you ever go to a ticket sale at your local arena and they got barricades and they're covered up by this cloth or tarp. It's very thin. So the man hits head first, was declared paralyzed, and unfortunately never recovered. And he has passed away from his injuries. At the age of 56, the pro wrestling world lost La Parka. Now, this past week on Wednesday, the way I found out, I was at home, sitting by my computer. I was prepping up for today's show, taking down notes of this week in wrestling, reading over some stories, and again, taking down some notes and see what else I could find to expand a bit on the program. By the way, if you hear a squeaking chair in the background, I apologize. Time to get out that WD-40. Soul Man Rocky Johnson has passed away at the age of 75. Best known teaming up with Tony Atlas, becoming the first ever African-American tag team champions in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, defeating the Wild Samoans, Alpha and Sika. And more importantly, Rocky Johnson, the father of Dwayne Johnson, better known as The Rock. It was about 5:30 Eastern Time. My computer was doing its normal upgrading or checking, scanning, or whatnot. So I decided, okay, you do that. Let me get on my phone. So I go to Facebook first and open up the app, refreshing a bit, and that was the first story on my newsfeed. I was, needless to say, in complete shock. I go back to my computer and canceled what was the computer doing, scanning and all that, and jump on my usual sources. Now, there was no story there, so I'm thinking, is this a hoax? I go back to my phone and trying to see who was it that posted the sad story. And it was the Cauliflower Alley Club. And I know they don't joke around. I know they take their veterans and legends very seriously. It's a really tight, close group. There's many names. It's a who's who of retired pro wrestlers, veterans, legends, Hall of Famers that get together once in a while and they catch up with each other, life, family. And when it comes to something like this, it wasn't about keeping it secret for as long as possible. It wasn't about being the first to report it, at least as far as I know they were, but just to let the world know what happened. And it was just pretty much a domino effect after that. Within the next 30 to 45 minutes, an outpouring of posts were all over the place on social media over the loss of Rocky Johnson. And I was reminiscing a little bit. I met the man only once, a couple of years ago in New York. Could not have been any nicer. I mean, he looked well to me anyway. I don't go around asking, in this case, retired pro wrestlers about their health and, their personal life like that. Although some will cancel due to illness or any other kind of sickness going on, they can't make it. They can't muster the strength to appear for the fans for a meet and greet. And again, it's understandable. But that particular day, I remember, it's like, wow, I'm meeting Rocky Johnson, and a whole bunch of thoughts are running through my mind. Besides, yeah, this is the man who fathered The Rock, but also shared the ring with Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Iron Sheik, Roddy Piper, the man who saved his own son at WrestleMania 13 against, ironically, the Iron Sheik and the Sultan and Bob Backlund. With the exception of The Rock, that's all men I've met at some point in my life. And I apologize. What really bummed me out the most is not only, during the domino effect, my time out here in the Tampa area, I've been so fortunate to meet many faces, many names in the independent scene of pro wrestling, specifically in WXW. It was there where last year I was able to put together a little documentary called the Anawani Legacy. It's on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out. And met the family. The family through marriage of Rocky Johnson, that being Afa, his wife Lynn, and daughter Valet, who have been very instrumental of me putting together the documentary in the first place. But on a personal level, it's almost as if I felt their pain for them as well, knowing how close this man is to them. And I reached out to express and offer my thoughts, prayers, and condolences to everyone. And at the same time, Dwayne Johnson was out of country, I believe, when this happened, promoting Jumanji, and I think doing another project out there. I can't remember where he was, but he wasn't in country. And I'm sure as soon as he found out the news, the first thing on his mind was to come home. So, Kendo Nagasaki, La Parka, and Soul Man Rocky Johnson. Please join me in a moment of silence for the loss of these three men. I was going to debut a new track as far as my opening intro for the JM Report. Big shout out to Joseph Michael, who assisted me just last week, matter of fact, after I dropped episode 79. We met we met in the early morning hours last Saturday, and kind of drawing a blank right now. That's not good. But if I could get my other said devices here. Yes, here we go. I was over at Grand Bay Recording Studios. And me and Joe, for short, we met up. And he offered, hey, I can spice it up a little bit for you. Give me the opportunity. I said, sure. It took a while because when we met, it was in the holiday or during the holidays between Halloween and Thanksgiving. So our schedules were conflicting all over the place, and only until after the fact, New Year's, things quieted down a bit and long enough for us to finally meet up. And boom, he got it for me. So I felt before all these tragic news took place that I would debut it today. Obviously, it wasn't on during the opening because I thought that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So I more than likely am going to debut it next week. So I'll just have the regular outro towards the end of this episode. And those who are curious, well, thank you for your understanding and tuning in next time for the Jan Report. But until then, there's a few stories here I'd like to get through. One of them, I don't know how to describe it, but it's pretty bad. But I think I'll save that for last because, again, there's just so much detail and who knows how and where it's going to end up. But let's get into other stories here, as last Saturday night, Jerry Lawler, who is still wrestling at this point in his career and life, was honored by the USA Championship Wrestling along with his son Brian Christopher, both giving a standing ovation by the fans, as Mid-South prodigy was there to represent his good friend, and Lawler had a Thunderdome steel cage match versus Matt Rivera. There is footage of this online. And speaking of Brian Christopher, it's still an ongoing case, last I checked. And hopefully the king can get his justice for his son, who many believe was, well, let's just say that situation was not dealt with properly. This past weekend, Ring of Honor had a meeting with the entire locker room in Concord, North Carolina. And it was here that it was announced that Marty Scurll will now be the new booker for the company. Scurll had signed a new deal with ROH, and according to BW Insider, who confirmed with multiple sources, the two sides have been working on a deal for some time now, after Scurll's last deal expired back in late November of 2019. However, it's not been confirmed as far as the length of the current deal goes, although ROH has been locking talent into multi-year deals as of late. So it makes sense that a new deal, as far as Marty Scurll and ROH goes, more than likely is a 2-year bid. Triple H. Wanted to save this story along with the other one towards the end, but I figured let me get one of them out of the way first. Triple H found himself in a bit of hot water this week after an interview with who did he speak with? Well, he was in the UK, and I don't have that in my notes as far as who he spoke to. Well, there's no denying that he had the interview. Also, even less so about what he said. But he's been apologizing ever since. But to some people, it was too little too late. So he was asked about a possible return to the ring for Paige, who's been out of action with a neck injury, though she had the surgery to repair it. But it's a similar injury that Stone Cold Steve Austin has, and Edge had, who's also been rumored for a possible return at the Royal Rumble. But Triple H, when asked about Paige in particular, well, he started by saying, as a fan, he would love to see that. But Paige's health was paramount, and that would be another issue to get around. So he will continue on, and this is, even though he was in character or not in character, but, you know, he's not wrestling anymore, at least once, twice a year. That's not even considered a part-timer. But has a front office position as the COO of a multi-billion-dollar company, regardless of what kind of business it is. You're a publicly traded company. So it goes without saying that you are expected to represent not only yourself as the COO, and not because you were one of the talents on the opposite side of contracts, that you present yourself in the most professional way possible in all forms of media when asked pretty much this serious question, and a very important one at that, of one of your previous said talents returning to the very same thing that she loves doing since a child that got her injured in the first place. Now, I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm not saying anything along the lines of whose fault it was to have Paige injured again and be on the DL for now. Things could change. Hell, she even said it in her retirement speech that if Daniel Bryan can do it, so can she, although injuries are different. But the fact that, as she put it, there's hope. But what I got out of this, Triple H as a person never changed. I don't care what you call him, Paul, Hunter, whatever. Never changed. So in a joking manner that later on he would admit that it was a bad one, said that Edge has a family and kids to think about, and that Paige might also have kids out there that she's not aware of. Now, you can take that for, word for word for what it's worth. It wasn't immediately clear what he was referring or talking about. Might be a stretch, might be people reaching, but the common, what everybody's agreeing upon, and it's common, what Triple H was referring to is the leaked video, but actually there's more than one, of Paige in several sexual encounters with previous coworkers and her in a relationship that she was in years ago with someone else that was not in the business. Many of them have been leaked. Some were taken down, but people make copies of copies, and still gets passed around. But that's neither here or there. But we all thought, at least consciously, that all of that was behind us. The stories, anyway. But here we are, some 2-3 years later, give or take. The CEO of the WWE, Triple H, and those are a lot of initials there. And I dare anyone to get all of those in a row in the next alphabet soup or cereal. Bringing up something that, quite honestly, was not only personal, I'm sure humiliating and embarrassing for Paige, but it's a chapter of life you're trying to get by. Not to mention that, although again taken lightheartedly, and I'm sure it was clear then by all parties, but when the New Day was feuding with the Usos and they had that little rap battle, how the Usos were referring to Xavier Woods' involvement in one video, and he wasn't at the time when the video was made, but when it was leaked, Xavier Woods is married. So he's out on injury now, but I'm sure that during that time it must have been one of those sunny day moments at the Xavier Woods compound, because I'm sure he had to speak and explain to his wife what happened, and that at some point, especially right before all this footage being leaked, that Paige and Xavier's wife have met and conversated. I don't expect, oh, by the way, before you were married to him, he and I, no, it's not something you bring up at a soda machine or in catering or whatnot. It's, wow. There are just some things you don't, some lines you don't cross, much less stories you talk about, because it's for that person's protection. So Triple H would tweet out that he apologized to Paige, saying, I reached out to her to apologize. I made a terrible joke, and I'm sorry if I offended her or anyone else. Well, first of all, he admits here that it was a joke, and a bad one. A terrible, as he puts it. But what amazed me, well, not so much that it happened, but those first few that started basically the trend of support for Paige. One is Renee Young, still under contract with WWE, and pretty much buried Triple H, her boss, one of her bosses, along with the Bella Twins, who are not under contract. And yeah, came to Paige's defense. That's really messed up. That there are just things you don't joke about. Many felt that Triple H was being a misogynist, and he ended up doing it just to apologize. I think a little bit more action should have been taken here. Personally, like, okay, you're not wrestling, you're not on TV much. You're running as COO. You got NXT in the back. So maybe it won't be a good idea to show your face anytime soon, at least in front of cameras. Hell, probably not show your face again to WrestleMania, because there's going to be a storyline starting really soon, whether it's during or after the Royal Rumble, that he has to have his one match of the year, and that being at WrestleMania. Against who? At this point, throw him in with Paige's boyfriend for all I care, who also chimed in, by the way, and calling him out on that, of what happened, that it was a shameful thing to do. He also mentioned that the company should be ashamed for what he did and said. And he said, matter of fact, he did tweet. Matter of fact, Ronnie Radke, the boyfriend of Paige, it's fuck Triple H all 2020. His response to what Triple H said about his girlfriend Paige. Paige would reply on a separate interview in the UK, as WWE has partnered up with a new channel to have WWE programming. All weekend, matter of fact, they were out there representing. Paige saying to Sports Kita, obviously I was a little bit perplexed, a little bit taken aback, because he is someone I truly look up to. And he's always been very respectful. So I just felt like he kind of got caught up with maybe in a joke, but I just don't think it was appropriate to joke about. But again, I don't know if it's something I'm not going to continually keep talking about, because I feel like people that need to know have done a pretty good job with it. So again, I don't know the Triple H in this case. I don't know him personally, but I know enough that once an asshole, always an asshole. And it's a perfect example. And who knows what has been said and done behind the scenes, but you know what? I am not going to start any accusations or any rumors, because I'm not there. But as far as me saying once an asshole, always an asshole, how many digs that has Triple H done on live TV? Matter of fact, remember the Slammy Award episode where he had one woman on each arm? This is right when the Generation Next started back in, what was this, 96? Talking about Sunny, when she was running in for the best, what was it? It wasn't Divas yet, but basically the best female bikini contest, whatever, between her, Sable, the Funkadactyls with Flash Funk and other women, Marlena. And taking the dig at Sable not being as good as Sunny, and that he knows a friend or has a friend that will know all about that backstage, of course referring to Shawn Michaels and their affair that's been publicized for many years now. Back then it wasn't sure, it was just rumors and whatnot, but many people without even realizing, he confirmed it on live television. And even then he was ridiculed and punished and whatnot. I mean, this guy really doesn't want to be king in the ring, does he? I mean, it wasn't his choice to. Well, actually, it was his choice. He said what he said, but I'm trying to talk about the current call. It was his choice to do it, but at the same time had an opportunity not to. But Vince did what he had to do because he was under pressure back then by so many people about going against tradition and it's disrespectful and blah, blah, blah. I bet anything, do that now with two talents that we all know is about to leave for, let's say, AEW or New Japan, AAA or wherever, that two or three of their friends will come out and everybody, half of them are faces, the other half are heels, and they're hugging it out in the ring, they're posing, putting up their faction signs and whatnot. And all this makes air on Raw, SmackDown, hell, even at a WrestleMania pay-per-view. I bet less than half of the same people that cried out foul from backstage at WWE at the time, including one Jim Cornette, although I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about it by today's standards. But the other half either probably won't care so much or just, you know what, at least now everybody had a heads up. That's my 2 cents, and I'm sticking to it. But again, some people just never change. Speaking of AEW, good news for them, as they and Warner Media announced that AEW Dynamite has been extended to air on TNT all the way through 2023 as part of a multi-year deal agreement. The show that debuted back on October 2nd and has nearly reached 32 million viewers across all platforms since then, with a series averaging 1.2 million viewers per episode. And they break it down here per demographic of 654,000 reaching the age demographic between of 18 and 49 per episode. In addition of the contract extension, fans will now bear witness to yet a second AEW show that's yet to be named, yet to be determined which day of the week it would air, but is in the works of a second AEW show, and many feel that's going to be very similar to WCW Saturday Night or WCW Main Event or Metal over at WWF or Shotgun Saturday Night, who knows. But if it's late night on the weekend, that's not going to help them, to be honest. Maybe a early afternoon weekend show would help, not only to wrap up what's happened during that week's episode of Dynamite, but what to expect, and maybe even footage of live event shows that they do here and there. Yes, the schedule was not as heavy as WWE, for example, but how else can they pick up more momentum? And by the way, not that it matters, but AEW's ratings destroyed NXT's, and I was a little bit surprised. Not that AEW won, as that seesaw's been going back and forth as of late, but by the amount. And I thought I saw NXT first, then I DVR'd AEW and watched it later on. I thought NXT had a pretty good show, but over AEW with their co-main event, the return of DDP, who performed tremendously, by the way. The Cody Rhodes storyline with MJF, what's going on between John Moxley and Chris Jericho. I thought they just had more invested as far as emotion and storyline. AEW won. NXT, again, had a great show. They got the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic going on. Very curious to watch the Women's Battle Royal to determine a new number one contender. And by the way, shout outs to Mercedes Martinez, who signed a deal with WWE, but first she needs to go through NXT. And her very first official debut, even though she participated in the Mae Young Classics, she officially debuted this past Wednesday night live with NXT during the Women's Battle Royal. I believe she reached as far as the final five. So she hung in there. And matter of fact, there were a lot of returning faces that I was shocked, not shocked at the same time, but still, it was great to see all these women. There were a couple I didn't recognize. I got to be honest. So I got to start catching up with my NXT women's division and their roster. But there's potential there to expand that division even more. Now, not to get too sidetracked here, but this is where I believe that the WWE women's tag team titles would benefit much more on NXT than it would SmackDown or Raw. Kairi Sane is still recovering from concussion, although she did make an appearance during Asuka's contract signing with Asuka. It was brief, but she was in, she was out. I think she's acting like, with her umbrella, acting like the 1960s penguin from the Batman TV show, turning and swirling her umbrella almost as if she was trying to hypnotize the audience. And who knows when and to who the Kabuki Warriors will drop those titles. But I say let them appear at Worlds Collide. NXT versus NXT UK. Put on an open challenge and handpick two single female wrestlers from the NXT roster and drop them. Drop the titles to person A and person B. It'll be considered doing the honors in a sense. Asuka and Kairi Sane came through NXT doing pretty well. But those tag team titles, the women's tag team titles to be precise, they're not going to build a legacy on their own, much less prestige, if they're never seen on TV. I mean, sure, Asuka is out there representing one half of the tag team titles, but even before and during Kairi Sane's injury, how often did we see them? They might have made an appearance on Main Event, but again, it's not a primary show, and unless you read about it or actually go online and log into the network, it doesn't count. Which is funny that a lot of people do, including myself. I don't count that. So so in a sense, it's almost on me. It's like, take it upon yourself to go watch, and then say, okay, so and so, like Sarah Logan, who's been appearing on Main Event as of late, only recently, call it a promotion or whatever, has been feuding with Charlotte Flair on the main roster of Raw. Like, okay, where has she been? As far as I knew, before it was mentioned that she'd been on Main Event, I thought she was just backstage at catering, waiting for her number to be called up. But I look at it like this: if WWE creative or announcers, whomever, are expecting the fans to be up to date with everyone, as far as this person is wrestling on this show, and this is the way you can watch them, and there'll be clips and highlights on our social media pages and whatnot. If they're not being advertised or even acknowledged, much less promoted on their A and B shows, Raw and SmackDown, to me that says like, well, they have no time for it. In a 3-hour show, they have no time to acknowledge their second and third shows on the network. To me, defines as we don't care. And by that logic, then why should I? You know, not everything is the fans' responsibility as far as how come so-and-so is not being utilized properly. But then they can easily turn around, well, they wrestle every week. They wrestle all the time. Do you not watch Main Event? I may or may not, but that doesn't mean that from there you can get a decent storyline or angle beginning and that it could easily transfer over to Raw or SmackDown. And by the way, didn't 205 Live go off the air? If you don't care, why should I? Getting back to AEW news, if you're a fan of AEW Dark, well, guess what? They're also planning to air AEW Dark on a weekly basis. Maybe not every week of the year, but according to Turner president Kevin Riley, they're looking to rebrand and give the AEW Dark show a new look, as they're going to embellish the show and, quote, put some more additional material, kind of behind the scenes, kind of docu-follow stuff, if you will, about the athletes and stories. You know, I'm all for these types of shows where You have obviously you're going to have a beginning, middle, and end. But when it comes to, if you break it down on a wrestling show, and this is something that was done back in the day, I remember, especially during Superstars of Wrestling and Wrestling Challenge. Not all the time, but sometimes. Before a match, you'll see set opponents backstage. Either they're warming up, having a quick interview before they go through the curtain, have the match, and come back. Not all the time again, but there'll be a post-match interview right on the spot as they're leaving the ring or as soon as they come back to the curtain. The way they do it now, especially on, let's say, Raw, for example, first of all, they don't know who to throw it to, because if they say, oh, now back to Charlie Caruso and it's Rey Mysterio in your face, either you're thinking, okay, did Charlie Caruso shave her head and now she's wearing a Rey Mysterio mask with contact lenses and learn how to speak Spanish? I mean, that might have been a miscue somewhere, but it happened more than once. But anyway, in the old days when it was Lord Alfred Hayes or Mean Gene, or even sometimes Jesse the Body Ventura. Of course, it's funny how Jesse only spoke to the heels mostly. And you have your promo. Difference is it wasn't in the ring taking up 15, 20, 30 minutes. Brief, get to the point. You got your bullet points, say what you got to say, and boom. Those extra 10 minutes, let's say, that was spared from said 45-minute promo cannot be used for something, obviously for another angle or a different segment, I should say, for someone else in a different part of the building, in a different part of the sketch, whatever. And it just blows my mind. Again, I can't stress the fact that Raw is a 3-hour show and it's still not enough time to throw in everything that they want to, because no one knows how to compress things. And yes, the one, especially heels that do a promo, they got to work the crowd. I get that. But you got a freaking microphone in your hand and you can speak over 20,000 fans, unless you're in an indoor stadium. Might be a little bit more difficult. I don't care how much you crank up them speakers. You're probably going to be drawn out. But from an average 15 to 20,000 seat arena, and yeah, I'm just being nice here because I know all these shows don't sell out. But you can speak over the crowd to get your point across, not to mention that you're a heel. And like, hey, don't cut me off, otherwise I'll cut you off trying to get your reactions out. Because I don't care if you don't like me. I don't care what you chant. I'm here to let you know that I'm going to challenge the champion this Sunday night. And you're looking at your new champion, and I'll be celebrating next Monday night. Good night. Whatever. Visuals help, sure. They always have video packages. Yeah, a little refresher or a little reminder from the previous week. But then if you're going to have said heel mention that in a promo for another 5 to 10 minutes, then what's the point? Besides the obvious wasting time. But that's just me. These writers, these creative team, or whatever, tone it down, or for lack of a better term, compress it. You can get across what you want to say in 2-3 minutes instead of the 15-20 that we have to endure. And I challenge anyone, especially for those who are watching Monday Night Raw. In a 3-hour span, count how many segments they are as far as promos, whether in the ring or backstage, and most of them are going to be in the ring, and longer, versus how many matches there are in 3 hours. Let me know in the comments what you come up with from this week's episode of Raw. Elias has agreed to a multi-year deal extension, as it was first mentioned on this week's WWE Backstage show. Also, Big Show, who made a surprise return last week on Raw, teaming up with Kevin Owens and Samoa Joe, talked to Sports Illustrated. Speaking of his surprise return, he said that they had me in an SUV with tinted windows, and I had a big chrome hearts hooded sweatshirt that I had over my head. I tried to hunch over and hide once we got back to the arena that no one could see. I walked into a private changing area, and up until he got to the gorilla position, no one knew that he was there. So kudos on that, because it's difficult to hide a nearly 7-foot man and keeping that under wraps physically more than anything else. When it comes to his recovery from hip surgery, he mentioned that he worked very hard through 5 different surgeries, including one that had a surgical infection. But he always believed that he was going to get back at some point where he could compete. Excuse me. So last Monday, hearing an incredible possible response from the crowd, he knew that he was going to enjoy every moment. Now, as far as his future goes with the WWE, he said, I'm being counted on to contribute, and that's exactly where I want to be. This is a privilege. I'm 47 years old, and there is a lot of younger guys who can do things I can't do. So I have to prove the right to walk down the ramp. I'm doing this now because I love it, not because I have to. This man has wrestled through 4 decades. 4 decades. Who could say that? Besides Diamond Dallas Page. That's almost saying he's wrestled for every 10 years of his life, and he's pushing 50. You imagine, you're just at the preschool, it's like, Mom, I'm joining the power plant for WCW. What's that? Don't worry about it. But, it was great to see Big Show. I had my thoughts about that last time on episode 79. He just had to be careful when it comes to taking big bumps, as he did this week. Took a 2-man powerbomb from AOP coming off the second rope. And if you go back and watch the footage, I believe it was from the hard cameras angle. On the way down, you see Big Show cringing and anticipating the impact. I mean, he was going to take the fall regardless, but it was almost as if like, oh, this might be a bad idea. Oh, I hope this is not a bad idea. And he landed, and he got curb stomped. Well, Rollins stomped his head, but Show landed on his shoulder instead. He's a big guy. But I have nothing but respect and admiration for the Big Show. At this point of his life, doing what he does, though tremendously toned down compared to his debut year in WCW. The man hopped over the top rope. He did drop kicks. He did kick bops. Yeah, that. As much as I'm sure a lot of us would like to see him pull those and other maneuvers off, especially at this point of his life, would be amazing. But sometimes you have to be honest with yourself and listen to your body. WWE has announced that they have signed 6 new talents. I mentioned earlier Mercedes Martinez, but the other 5, who are they? Well, one, Jake Atlas, a California native who broke into the promotion through Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. For those who don't know or remember, he is the man who appeared on the episode of Undercover Boss where it featured Stephanie McMahon. And it was here that he explained during a one-on-one sit-down portion of the show, saying that he would like to be, and his dream is, becoming the first ever openly gay WWE champion. Now, he was specific here. He said WWE champion. So, assuming everything works out for the man and makes it to the main roster, for example, and he's in a pay-per-view match for a title, what are the odds of that particular title not being the WWE title? Could be the Intercontinental, could be the United States, or maybe a tag team title, but he announced his dream here, or at least on the episode of Undercover Boss. Millions of viewers watched and heard that. So all eyes on WWE and maybe even Stephanie McMahon for saying, yeah, let's see what we can do. Let's make that happen. Indeed. Next up, Sydney Bateman from St. Louis was a cast member of Cirque du Soleil specializing in hoop diving. So in other words, a very athletic personality here in Sydney Bateman. I mean, there are different versions of Cirque Soleil, excuse me. And which one did I caught one out here last year. Oh, what was the subtitle to it? It had a bit of an urban theme to it. Oh, I just can't remember it. I attended the Thursday night show and I remember this unfortunately because that weekend, that Saturday night, a performer lost his life due to a terrible accident, a stunt gone wrong. But that's not to put any jinx or anything like that on Bateman here. If you never caught a Cirque du Soleil performance at all, anytime, do yourself the favor and check out, even if it's for a few minutes, I had a performance on YouTube. How athletic, how some of these men and women are able to contort their bodies to bend and well, not stretch. This is not the Fantastic Four, but pulling off feats of athleticism in ways that you probably never seen before. Not at the gym, not at the local public park. The balance, unbelievable. Matter of fact, I'm going to go home and watch some footage on Sydney Bateman just to be sure and have a better idea of what she's done in the past. Anthony Francis, a 6'5", 330-pound, 5-year veteran of the NFL, who has played for the Miami Dolphins, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Washington Redskins. He's actually made headline news about this recently, especially out here in the Florida area, because, the Performance Center is in Orlando. And having ties with the Dolphins, of course, a lot of people are talking about how Mr. Francis can have a great successful career in WWE. It's been a while since we had a NFL or former NFL player crossover. Of course, many remember the WWE NFL Battle Royale taking place at WrestleMania 2 in Chicago, won by Andre the Giant, but it was at the time's who's who of NFL players, current and former at the time, competing in the Battle Royale. Of course, Perry the Refrigerator, who became a Hall of Famer later on, tremendous performance, and went toe-to-toe with Big John Studd, who was no small man himself. Biting my tongue here. Emily Anzulis, a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and currently training in Taekwondo, actually competed in Dwayne Johnson's Titan Games, becoming one of the first female Titans, winning the whole thing. I remember watching the show. I missed, unfortunately, the finals, so good to know that she competed in the finals and won. So definitely has a athletic advantage here. Those Titan Games were no joke. An extreme version of American Gladiators, to say the least, but curious to see how Emily will perform here. And then there is Zachariah Smith, 7 foot tall, 310 pounds, from Oklahoma, playing college basketball for Morgan State University, and has even played against longtime rivalries, the Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington Generals. So 2 big men, both with having tremendous athletic backgrounds, have a very good chance to go a long way in the WWE. More than likely, all said participants, all 5 new signees, 6 actually, counting Mercedes Martinez. But more than likely, they're all going to go through NXT first. And curious to see how they're going to debut these 2 big men in particular. Well, there's some Impact Wrestling news I'd like to get to. A bit of an injury update, according to Tommy Dreamer over at Busted Open Radio. Rob Van Dam has suffered a concussion and could not recall or even know of his match with Dega this past weekend during Hard to Kill. Van Dam's original opponent was supposed to be Brian Cage, who went to the bout with a torn bicep. Cage didn't compete the full match, but he did take a Van Daminator, which wound up splitting open his lip. Ouch. And there is a photo floating around online with a close-up of said split lip from Brian Cage. Cage went to the hospital for it and was stitched up. Moose is also believed to have suffered a concussion. Tommy Dreamer said that the former football player's star has also a potential back injury, taking a bad back body drop on the entrance ramp. And Dreamer's also confirmed that Madman Fulton dislocated his shoulder during his match with Ken Shamrock, but yet continued to finish up the match with said injury. So in one night, you had 4 injuries, and in the case of Brian Cage, adding another injury on top of his already injury from a torn bicep and now busted lip. All of this happening at Hard to Kill from Impact Wrestling this past Sunday on their pay-per-view. I mean, although the show ended on a high note, which I'll get to in a second, but the show itself also had a bit of a downslide. And if you didn't see the pay-per-view, you probably caught up with Impact Wrestling show on Access TV, which, at least in this case of Hard to Kill, was a bit of a highlight packaging. All of the matches, not the matches in its entirety, but some of the matches, specific moments, and also aired a segment with Rob Van Dam and his wife, Katie Forbes, and Katie Forbes' girlfriend. I didn't read up about this until I saw it myself, and they actually aired this from start to finish as is, although there had to be 1 or 2 censorships because of nip slips from Katie Forbes. Well, let me set up the scenario. I'm sure you guys would rather see it than hear about it, but this is supposedly the segment that removed Impact Wrestling from Twitch.tv and having their account disappear into thin air. And even though Impact Wrestling officials are trying to get it back, but it's easier said than done. I mean, you guys obviously, or someone didn't bother to read up on the terms and conditions of what can and cannot be shown, in this case on Twitch. So it either slipped between the cracks, no pun intended, and no one just didn't bother to double check or confirm or permission, whatever. But afterwards, Twitch said, no more. So what happened? A segment with Rob Van Dam, RVD, his wife Forbes, and her girlfriend, basically all in bed. Both women in 2-piece bikinis, bottom piece being full-fledged thong. Katie Forbes didn't know when to say when she was poured into that bikini top, especially because somebody was peeking through and had to be censored. But the segment went on with all the blurs, and there were a lot of booty shots towards camera. And I think there was only one camera, one angle the entire time from the foot of the bed. RVD was in his bathrobe, not under the covers, having one woman on each side, on each arm. I think people forget what was said much more than what was seen. And it was declared extremely, scandalous. Too much for Twitch. Although the company is working now to get the suspension lifted. One says the account was suspended, another one saying was deleted. But either way, they have no account right now with Twitch. Between Impact and Twitch, they have a deal where they can show live streams as they did this past week. Also, content from their video library. So if anyone else has seen this segment, let me know. Do you think Twitch overreacted? Even though Impact took the necessary steps as far as censorship, but was this, I don't have a Twitch account, so I wouldn't know. But clearly some content could not be shown or provided without said permission or consent ahead of time, but it aired as is. And if you did see the segment, what did you think? Was it just RVD being RVD with his two friends? And he's posted stuff like this, especially on his Instagram account, on both sides, RVD and Katie Forbes, of their good time that they're having. Either it's in a jacuzzi or a hotel room or what have you. Beyond that is, I would say, is up to anyone's imagination, but clearly they're enjoying life. I don't know how much of enjoyment can RVD have with said concussion, but well, you live and learn, I guess. And I'm pretty sure that's not his first concussion. But as of right now, no twitching for Impact Wrestling. So now, main event story time. And it definitely was the talk of the town. I'm sure eventually it would spark up again. But let me start with the end of the story, where the main event for Hard to Kill saw Tessa Blanchard defeat Sami Callihan to become the new Impact Wrestling World Heavyweight Champion. Yes, history was made. Yes, Tessa Blanchard was the first ever woman to become a world champion through a men's division. They do have a Impact Wrestling women's title, but she went after the men's title. And we almost had this had Vince McMahon and or Bruce Pritchard not changed their minds back in '99 about China legit being in contendership for the WWE title versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. But we all saw how that went, how that played out during the SummerSlam pay-per-view, and it wasn't meant to be. Although obviously they kept China in mind and made her become Intercontinental Champion, and for a little while, Intercontinental Co-Champion with Chris Jericho. But and when life gives you lemons, right? But in this case, I'm talking about Tessa Blanchard. What started with a simple tweet on January 11th, Tessa tweeted, "Hey women, try supporting one another. Cool things happen." This came out of nowhere. There was no before or during any conversation or any event or promo, at least not one that I'm aware of, that had Tessa Blanchard just tweet that. Now, nothing wrong in the statement itself. At the time, anyway, I was thinking along the lines like, well, she has a main event title shot coming up. Maybe that's what she was referring to about cool things happen. But then Allison Kay replied, "Remember when he spat in a black woman's face and called her the N-word in Japan? Was that supporting women? The audacity of this tweet." Tessa replied, "Not true. That's my statement, and the most attention I'll give it because of how actually ridiculous it is." Then the floodgates opened up. Chelsea Green, who just debuted for NXT, chimed in and tweeted/replied, "You've consistently put me down, bullied and belittled countless female workers, including me. Is that support?" And Tessa, who previously said that's all the attention she's going to give it, replied or retweeted to Green saying, I have been anything but kind to you. I've dealt with mean girls since I started, not saying I'm a saint. Hell, I've had my ups and downs, and I have made silly decisions. Such is life. You have zero merit in your comments. Instead of putting me down here for a little, cout, you've got my number. We don't know if Chelsea ever reached out to Tessa. I'm going to assume probably not. And joining in these building accusations towards Tessa Blanchard, NXT UK's Ilso Dawn, MLW's Priscilla Kelly, Big Swall, Rebel, Shauna, Renee Michelle, And even the one person in the center of all this controversy, La Rosa Negra, it was revealed that she was the one that allegedly Tessa Blanchard belittled and spit in the face and was called the N-word in Japan. And Renee Michelle revealed on social media that La Rosa Negra went to her, Renee Michelle, and talked about said incident. That most of these women were also part of or around, all may not have seen what happened, but heard about it, or what took place in Japan. And echoing previous statements from all these women. This past Monday, because all these accusations happened pretty much between last Friday and Saturday, right before Tessa Blanchard's big match versus Sami Callihan for the Impact World title. So this past Monday, after the pay-per-view, La Rosa Negra released a video on social media. It's in Spanish, but it's subtitled for those who don't understand. Basically explaining what happened. So if you head over to the, roughly translated Contra Luna or Contra Luna site, you can watch the video in its entirety. Or if you're following La Rosa Negra on Twitter, there's a link there as well in her timeline. But she talked about the support she's gotten ever since Stardom and the incident with Tessa Blanchard made public, saying that she generally doesn't talk about her personal life and had moved on from the incident. Specifically saying that she gave it to God. She thanked Chelsea Green and other female stars for backing her up on Twitter once everything has gone public. She felt that it was fulfilling a responsibility. She didn't go into details as far as the incident itself, but she thanked the fans for their support. Meanwhile, again, this all happened last weekend before Hard to Kill. Over at the Heavy Metal Wrestling Cease and Destroy event, Tessa Blanchard was pulled from that show. Refunds were offered. However, as mentioned, Tessa still had her main event match versus Sami Callihan. So, what do you say to something like that? Right now, the accusations and Tessa's denying it. I don't see Tessa being put on trial here anytime soon. And how I looked at it, well, if it's true, that's fucked up. If not, you people need to move on with your life. But for the record, no, I was not in Japan when this incident took place, allegedly. Allegedly seeing, I wasn't there to see allegedly Tessa Blanchard spit in La Rosa Negra's face. I wasn't there to see and hear allegedly Tessa Blanchard call La Rosa Negra the N-word. This is between them two. Then again, besides Tessa Blanchard denying what she said or has done, but she's not, as far as her rebuttals and her replies, not once ever mentioned about La Rosa Negra or Japan or any kind of incident anywhere in the world. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying it did. But because it's been made public, it's still none of my business, but it's made public. But what pissed me off was said public and a huge number of them taking sides. And how many compare this to the Hulk Hogan sex tape racial rant situation? So that led me to conclude, wait a minute. we all know, we all saw, as sick people as we are, at least whatever footage was available, and we all heard the audio from the very same video that was leaked by Gawker. That's the only difference. Hogan had video and audio leaked. So because we don't see or hear, or both, Tessa Blanchard spit in, allegedly, La Rosa Negra's face and call her the N-word, allegedly, we're just going to dismiss any and all denial from Tessa Blanchard. She even said she's no saint. Hell, I say that all the time. I've done some stupid shit in my life. If I haven't paid for it already, I'm sure I will eventually, before said life is over. All I know is, and can no one tell me any different or speak down on me about it, that I'm not doing and trying at the same time, not only to better myself in life, but to do better in general, no matter what consequence and situation I'm faced with. And that includes things that are beyond my control. Shit don't work out, okay. There's always tomorrow. And when need be and necessary, yeah, I will apologize and own up and man up to my mistakes. But we're not talking about Bayari. This is not what did good old JM do that one night in the Catskills. Never mind. So Tessa Blanchard denied everything. Says that that's not her. Hell, there were some fans even pulling in Tully Blanchard, her father, into all this. Like, during his heyday, how racially insensitive he was, and how that territory of the NWA was, and blah blah. I mean, wow, just wow. And I know all the time I say whenever I meet so and so, how nice they were to me. And I'll get their autograph. I'll take a picture with them. And, that's it. That will be my experience with them. And to be honest, there have been a handful of people, men and women, who have just done complete wrong, not only for the business, but life in general, towards other people, lying about certain things, making shit worse at points. And even though more or less things are cleared up or we moved on from it, well, it's not my place to say, I forgive and forget. But considering how long it took you to own up to your part in whatever the situation is or was, it says a lot about your personality. It says a lot about you as a person. People take the route of becoming a new born again Christian in some cases. Okay, fine. I appreciate you not rubbing that in my face, but great. I'm Catholic. You don't see me holding up a Bible in your face because I want to. Your beliefs similar to mine, maybe, but different. And I don't want to turn this whole show into a Sunday morning school now in church. Duh. Again, it just amazed me how people just jumped, or maybe not jumped is a good word term here, but took sides. Now, I'm not saying that, and I'm not calling La Rosa Negra a liar. And she has all these people backing her up. So it's basically the world versus Tessa Blanchard. And yes, I get upset every time, especially when it's proven that one party is being accused of racism for whatever reasons at whatever point in time in life and never own up to it, and it actually did happen, then you're a piece of shit. But we live in the world, at least in this part of the world, this country, United States of America, guilty until proven innocent. So let us all not jump the gun. At least at the most, be aware. At the least, the most? What? No. At the very most, be aware of the situation. That being of the accusations towards Tessa Blanchard. And for reasons that we'll probably not know anytime soon, Impact Wrestling decided to move forward regardless, not wanting to change their main event, not wanting to change out Tessa for someone else for her to win the title and go on a high note. So weekend started off shitty for her, but ended up big, but still feeling the effects of the shitty side of things. The only thing I could say is let's wait and see what happens. The ball is in Tessa Blanchard's court. Yes, she has denied this. She hasn't called anyone. I'm not calling anyone a liar. But it's really hard to defend yourself when you got a group of people, in this case, former co-workers, saying the same thing, basically. And that the victim in the case, La Rosa Negra, allegedly, is only now speaking about it. As I mentioned, too much detail, but this happened late 2019, last year. Mid to late 2019, when everybody was in Japan. And let's not forget, half of these people who are pointing fingers and accusing Tessa Blanchard that went to Twitter and said, well, how dare you? How could you? The audacity. They only heard the story. I'm not playing advocate here. I'm not even playing an attorney here. All the cards are not on the table just yet. Yes, it's a huge accusation. It sucks being accused for something like this. I know there are worse things you can be accused of, but this is on top of the list. What do you do? Do you start a campaign and defend your innocence? Do you lay low? I mean, you're a world champion now for a promotion. You know, it's ranked really low, but still a promotion nonetheless. They still go out nationwide putting on shows. Hell, they did a show from a brewery a couple of weeks ago. So much respect to TNA, now Impact Wrestling, the little engine that could. That one little that one little bug that just refuses to give up. How can you not respect a company like that? And to have a representative as your world champion in Tessa Blanchard, under the microscope, I'm sure, but now has to defend not only herself, the title, but also the title that the company represents. All I'm going to say is I hope everything works out. Apologies are issued when necessary and to those who deserve it. And if proven otherwise, that it turns out that all of this really happened, Tessa has a lot of explaining to do. 20, 25 years ago, same situation, but people will move on much quicker than they do now, because nowadays nobody forgets, because stories are shared on social media, and that's a good thing. Hell, that's a good thing. Chances are, before you saw it on your local news, you probably saw and heard it first on Facebook, for example, about teachers beating the shit out of little kids because they won't be quiet, or because they wouldn't turn down the volume of their cell phones. Regardless of how, teacher beats the shit out of a kid, doesn't matter if the kid was handicapped or had trouble, difficulty hearing, or whichever behavior disorder they might have, or any, if they have an unfortunate, a mental or physical handicap. It's just unbelievable. Can't say how many times I saw that first on social media, and then next thing you know, it's on World News Tonight. And no, I'm not giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. So far, things have quieted down ever since, but doesn't say that this won't resurface again anytime soon. And again, hope everything works out. With that said, obviously no Raw, NXT, AEW review. I've been pretty busy myself, other than just watch said shows and take a few mental notes and mention them here. But for now, I think I'll stick to whichever pay-per-view events are coming up. Obviously, Royal Rumble is in 2 weeks. I'll have the lineup official as far as next week goes, ready for you. And then the following week with the results of said Royal Rumble. And we'll see how that works out. But before I go, I do have an upcoming episode of Talking with JM. It will be up this weekend, right after the JM Report. And my guest will be Lynn Anawani. And if that name sounds familiar, then yes, she is the wife of Wild Samoan and WWE Hall of Famer Afa, who run WXW, the Wild Samoan Pro Wrestling Training Camp out in Mineola, Florida. And had the privilege to meet the family last year, matter of fact, last spring. And since then, we've pretty much kept in contact. And she has something to offer to the world, basically. Something very positive and something that she feels that can help everyone to a better, long life and healthier lifestyle. So if you want to know more, tune in this weekend for another episode of Talking with JM. But for now, thank you for listening to the JM Report. If you have any comments, leave them down below. If you like what you heard, click that like button, subscribe to the JM channel, and also you can follow me throughout social media as is linked down in the description. Of course, that's what it is. So, this is JM. Everyone behave, be good. Until next time.
Open my eyes, leave it all behind. So open your mind and realize that your beautiful world could take my life.